Spoilers for House of M, written by Brian Michael Bendis and illustrated by Olivier Coppio'S. Okay, I don't know if I said that right, and I apologize.
I have a question for God. Why?
House of M is a story that has defined the X-Men since before I started avidly reading comics. I've always loved the X-Men, but I didn't start reading comics until DC's New 52 reboot. And I didn't start avidly reading Marvel comics until the all-new, all-different relaunch with Laura Kinney as Wolverine and Jane Foster as Thor, save for the big Marvel event here and there. Even then, House of M was a storyline that the X-Men and mutants couldn't escape. It had ended with nearly all mutants on Earth becoming human, and what I could only assume was a symbolic allegory for what if minorities were stripped of what made them minorities. Like, what if people who were gay were made straight with 3 words, or black people made white, or women made into men? That's how it felt in the storylines that came after House of M, at least the ones that were well thought out. But the true insulting nature of this idea and story never quite hit me before reading this book. Storylines for nearly a decade until Jonathan Hickman's Dawn of X were about mutants searching for hope and answers when there were none, about the kinship between fellow mutants when so many were no longer mutants, and the ways depowered mutants fought to be relevant and important when there was no way they could truly fight. What followed had a far deeper and quality introspection than what House of M actually offered in its setup. For the longest time, I've always thought that the words "no more mutants" was born out of some betrayal the X-Men committed against Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, or mutants in some way betraying her. I thought that for the longest time, she was striking out against her minority brethren who refused to accept her as they wanted to be accepted. Or maybe she had been manipulated, or betrayed into thinking that was true at least. I had thought, even for a time, before reading this book, that in the Scarlet Witch's madness, she thought the best way to protect mutants from mankind's hate was to make them no longer mutants. A flawed but understandable logic for a mentally ill individual with so much power. But, as it turns out, all this time, she destroyed all the mutants because her pre-retcon daddy was a jerk. I thought House of M was this old classic that I would eventually read, enjoy, and herald as an underrated great whose controversy outshines its premise. The book started out this way. It started out so well, with character ideologies clashing over what to do with the Scarlet Witch. Watching the Avengers and X-Men argue over how to deal with an overpowered, destructive, and dangerous mutant who served on the Avengers was, in one word, gripping. Writer Brian Michael Bendis immediately got me on the verge of yelling at the page as each hero argued over which team had more reason to decide what to do with Wanda. The team she terrorized and attacked as a member of the Brotherhood of Evil, or the superhero team who rehabilitated her and her brother from crime. Essentially, her victims or her friends. This first issue was so good, and the art by Olivier Coppio'S truly captured the emotions among them all, especially Wanda in the guilt she feels in killing her friends in like a previous story arc, and the maddening agony of losing her children. And then, when the first issue ended, with all the Avengers and X-Men going to find Wanda as the world changed, it ended setting up so much potential. It ended with Spider-Man in this new world, married to Gwen Stacy with a son. And the worst thing happened that could possibly have happened in the second issue. Wolverine woke up and just remembered everything. The moment the second issue starts with Wolverine, for some reason remembering everything, I repeat, for no reason, is when things start to fall apart. When the book focuses on everyone chasing after Wolverine, wondering what the hell is his problem, that's when the book loses me.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
The book, through Wolverine trying to understand everything that's happening, trying to figure out where he is, introduced this amazing premise of a world where everyone got their happy ending, their true greatest desire. And I mean everyone. Every Earth-based hero and villain got what they wanted, and all in a world where mutants were on top. Okay, so I guess that's not really everyone, but you know what I mean. Everyone's important. Then Bendis spent, honest to God, next to no time truly dissecting this paradigm for any of these heroes, save for some quick peeks into their well-off lives. The only time this world seemed imperfect is when Hank Pym considered doing something that would elevate humanity, but it was never clear what that was. In this world, Captain Marvel got to be the world's greatest superhero. She-Hulk was an ace attorney, having a pretty enjoyable affair with Daredevil by the looks of it. And Cyclops and Emma Frost got to be a normal couple in their dream jobs. Even Captain America got to grow old. We got these little glimpses, teases of things that were supposed to come. But then, for the rest of the cast, if we even learned how they got to enjoy themselves, all we got were non-comic pages of fake newspaper reportings telling us how all the major players in the Marvel Universe were doing, but barely any introspection. The following issues, until the midpoint, were instead filled with fleeting looks at everyone's lives, with Wolverine trying to find somebody who remembered the old world, but no real dissection of it. The human heroes who are rebelling against the mutants never said why life was so especially hard in a world where Spider-Man can be happy. Spider-Man. He hasn't been happy since he hit puberty. These superheroes just seem unhappy with fleeting memories of an old life that, honest to God, wasn't all that great. If the world needed superheroes, the world couldn't be that great. But Wolverine soldiered on as if the old world was how it had to be, with no real explanation as for why. We never even got any real explanation as to why he would want to work for Magneto's version of S.H.I.E.L.D. So he can get paid to beat up people? I don't get it. It's as if all the parts I wanted to read were left to tie-in comics that I didn't even know existed. They should be in this book, especially in this collection. Then, immediately, as soon as Wolverine found the first humans resisting, the story introduced a Deus Ex Machina that let heroes quickly remember everything that happened, in the form of a little girl named Layla. A girl, I might add, who I didn't know about before this comic because she hasn't shown up since, and you know why? Because the concept of her is stupid and insulting and annoying as a mere plot device, just like Ulysses in Civil War II, also written by Brian Michael Bendis.
I'm beginning to see a pattern here that I'm not so sure if I like.
I'm starting to understand why Marvel fans got sick of him. He's a good idea guy, but his execution for anyone that's not Spider-Man just doesn't hit the mark. He had this cool idea setting up what could have thrived by just showing how each character lived, but instead he immediately broke it down and destroyed it. He had this amazing premise of everybody getting what they want, including a mutant-led world, and Bendis just skipped over this. As the exception that proved the rule in this book, Spider-Man had the best stuff. We know that from the newspaper clippings that Mary Jane didn't end up with Peter, and likely because of it she became a successful, famous actress, and that fact destroyed Peter, knowing that in a normal world, she'd be better off without him. Then, in a perfect world, from the one scene in the beginning, we know that Spider-Man not only didn't kill Gwen Stacy, for the first time, he got to settle down with her, have a son, and be happy. And even beat Spider-Man in a world where Uncle Ben was alive. We know this from 2 pages worth of scenes and newspaper clippings. All this is important stuff from things that aren't in the actual story. Yet, when the group of heroes who have woken up from the nightmare show up before Peter, despite having spent no real time with this living Gwen Stacy, their son or Uncle Ben, is still utterly destroying to see Spider-Man fall apart, learning it's not real. Spider-Man truly is the only one who has the appropriate reaction to learning that a life with everything he wanted isn't real. It destroyed him, left him running, crying, and wailing to learn that his wife was dead, his Uncle Ben was dead, and his son wasn't real. But that did not bank on proper build-up. It's effective only because we know Spider-Man's story. Should Spider-Man not be ubiquitous in culture, that scene wouldn't mean a goddamn thing. The rest of the book was just the heroes pulling each other out of their perfect lives, while building up stuff that never happens. The heroes got together and attacked Magneto, assuming he convinced the Scarlet Witch to change the world, while also forcing Professor X to go along with it. These were the 2 things that kept being built up throughout the story. Professor X being captured by Magneto, and likely dying considering Magneto has a grave for him, and that Magneto was the one who forced Wanda to create this world. Those are the 2 things this story kept making apparent. Firstly, Professor X, whether he was dead or alive, never returns past the first issue. That's just a plotline left hanging with not a single hint that will be followed up on somewhere else. Then, as a twist that almost makes sense, the heroes were wrong. It wasn't Magneto who convinced Wanda to change reality, but it was actually Pietro, Quicksilver, Wanda's twin brother. Except the problem is that it actually wasn't surprising that Magneto wasn't the big villain, because this book spent next to no time with him. He literally showed up for a few small scenes here and there where he just said hello to people once the world changed. There's no build-up to why Magneto must surely be the bad guy, evil ruler, because we barely see Magneto as the ruler of the world. For all intents and purposes, he may actually have been a good ruler. For it all came to a head where the heroes realized that Magneto was under Wanda's spell too, and he wasn't the villain. Yet somehow the story still continued to treat him like he was. Emma Frost revealed to him what Pietro did, and then Magneto went and killed him. This is why Wanda said the 3 infamous words, "No more mutants." This is why Wanda put the X-Men on one of the most controversial and at some points worst written character arcs in comic book history. Because her father killed her brother. Because Magneto believed in his cause more than caring for his children, who, for all intents and purposes, have been as evil as him, as destructive as him, and as manipulative as him. Now, nothing Wanda believed about Magneto wasn't true. The problem is that Wanda turned around and punished not Magneto, but the mutants who were often also his victims. That's why 99% of mutants had to be depowered, because Wanda wanted to spite Magneto. It makes no sense in a story that slowly made less and less sense as I read it. So yeah, House of M is a disappointing story with so much possibility and imagination in its premise, and it never lives up to it. There is true drama and conflict to be found with heroes fighting heroes for once, a staple of Marvel stories. They could have been arguing and fighting over whether or not they should put the world back, but that never happened. There was true drama and conflict behind Wanda turning a targeted minority into the majority, but that didn't happen. After the first issue, the only thing that this story always did well for itself, on its own, was Olivier Coppio'S art. It's truly amazing how he captured raw emotion and subtle ones. You can see the condescension in Wolverine's face and the pain in Peter Parker's. But it's just so wasted on this book. I can't say it enough. Don't read House of M. And if you already have, I'm sorry, I hope you enjoyed the art. I'd never been so upset with the book that I've reviewed before this one. It is actually really disheartening. I guess if you want to learn why the Scarlet Witch is now an enemy of the X-Men and mutant kind, you can probably make up a more interesting reason than what this book posits here. And if you like this book for something other than the art, I want to know why.